During the 70s, the thundering Formula 5000s were the kings of New Zealand motorsport. They were the race car every young fan dreamed of driving. But for most of those fans, those dreams eventually became distant memories. But 2 decades later, some have finally made their dream come true.
They were the sound of the 70s. But unlike disco, Formula 5000 never really disappeared. Like flares and platform shoes, they were just waiting for their comeback. And today, the former kings of the track roared again.
Back in the 60s and 70s, when old Jim Bolt was racing Marriage, he used to race at Marriage. And I was standing at Ruapuna one day and I thought, the sound of it going down past that back straight, I thought, I've got to have one of those. So I bought this one here.
I used to come here with my family many years ago watching the New Zealand Grand Prix. I think it was Boxing Day in summer, in the days when you'd have 100 or 150,000 people here watching these cars.
The Tasman Formula 5000 series, which began in Pukekohe today, has given the cars a new lease of life. But up to $200,000 a car, it's an expensive sport. But the speed and sound make it worth every cent.
This is the first time I've been to this track. Like I've never raced something here before, and it's pretty fast. Makes excuse the living daylights out of me.
Many of the cars have amazing histories. Stan Redmond's Lola T332 won both the Australian Grand Prix and the Drivers' Championship in 1979. And for one Kiwi motorsport legend who made his name in the big V8s, these cars are simply the best.
Very good to come out and watch Formula 5000s. They were the greatest cars I ever drove, and even today, those are the only car I've ever driven that I can really say I super enjoyed.
But despite his enthusiasm, the godfather of New Zealand motorsport isn't in a hurry to relive the past.
Kenny Smith, and well, he was one of the guns, he still is. We're trying to talk Kenny into running one of the cars that's here spare at the moment, but I don't think he wants to beat us.
Rain may have spoilt the last Formula 5000 race at Pukekohe today, but the big cars are back, heading over to the ditch to Melbourne in November to take on the Aussies. Te Kauhoi Wano, 3 News.
The Ruapuna racetrack near Christchurch took a trip back in time today. Over the years, the PDL and now Scope Classic Meet has earned a reputation as one of the biggest in the Southern Hemisphere. Today, it reached a world scale, with the biggest Formula 5000 field seen since the mid-70s. They're the flared trousers of motorsport. In their day, the thundering Formula 5000 was second only to Formula 1. And from 1970 to 76, they were the kings of New Zealand racetracks. But 1977 wasn't a good year to be king.
Because I love you too much, babe.
Just as Albus gulped his last cheeseburger, the 5000 swallowed their last gallon of gas.
I always thought it was a great formula. They were seriously fast cars, made a lot of noise, looked good, and I was very sorry to see them go. Equally, I'm very happy to see them back again in such numbers.
Grand Prix legend Chris Amon also raced 5000s in the Tasman series, but never was the field this big. At 18 cars, this is the largest gathering of the formula anywhere in the world since the 70s, which has led to international interest in this weekend's Scope Classic meeting.
It's people reliving what motor racing was like in the late 70s, and I think that they're an easy car to drive.
Last year, the Scope Classic drew a crowd of 35,000. While wet weather kept numbers down this time, it made for some exciting racing.
Great cars to drive, with a lot of horsepower, and I think it seems to be a growing movement, not just here but around the world.
The series makes 2 more stops at Teretonga and Pukekohe before the 5000s join today's V8s at the New Zealand round of the Supercar Series in May.
Second and Jim Lovell third. And this is what the big crowd have come to see. They've been treated to the expectation of a field of over 20 cars in the Formula 5000 Sir Robertson Stewart Grand Prix, but unfortunately the wet weather has put paid to that. There's been a couple of engine failures as well. Shane Windleborn from Auckland had problems with his Lola T400 and he didn't make the journey, but still a good field and probably a better field than we had at the last Lady Wigram Trophy back in the 70s. It is number 30 out in the front, and that is Ian Clemens from Christchurch in the Lola T332. A couple of New Zealand built cars out there, some Graham McRae GM1s and some Beggs. We'll have a look for them as we identify them, but it is number 30, Ian Clemens. This car, like so many in the field, completely restored, completely rebuilt from the ground up with John Crawford and his team. And although the conditions belie it, these cars are very, very fast indeed. In fact, in the dry, they run round this lap configuration here at Ruapuna in the 119s. And to put it in perspective, that's about the times of the Formula 3 cars were doing at the Lady Wigram Trophy race just a couple of weeks ago. So Clemens in the front. In second place, it looks like one of the McRae's. Just get a number on that as they work their way onto the long front straight. Get on, Clemens has got it wrong, and so too has the 22, and that's Stu Lush in the McRae GM1. And, well, they're going off in all directions. 95's gone as well, and that's Frank Lyons. He's here with his wife, Judy, the husband and wife combination. Hopefully they'll get back onto the racetrack. Clemens has done the whole 360 and just got going again. So too now his Lush in the GM1, the Graham McRae built car, with McRae's number 22 on it. A couple just rejoining the racetrack. So these cars, very hard to keep on the track like this. Most of them running wet tyres from Dold Industries. They all run Avon tyres, and they're powered by 5,000 cc's or 5-litre V8 engines, predominantly Chevys, but there's some Fords and some Repcos in there as well. And this man has regained his composure, and can you believe it, he's regained the lead. So number 30, Ian Clemens, sitting out in the front of this, the Scope Classic Highlight. Number 14 through there is Murray Sinclair, based out of Hong Kong or Auckland. And one of the more modern cars just spinning around, Jeff Harriman in the Rolt RT20. Another Aucklander hasn't had a happy time here in the wet conditions at Ruapuna. But this man, well, rain, what rain, he says. Done a whole lot of laps around here at Ruapuna, based out of Christchurch. Number 30, this is Ian Clemens in the front. Good scraps going on behind. Watch out there for David Abbott, number 3, the Lola T430. David, one of the organising committee, along with Tony Robertson and Murray Sinclair, have got this big field together. And an international field it is too. We mentioned the husband and wife team from England. Also got a couple from the United States of America there. Paul Morgan from the United States in the field as well. There is David Abbott in the Lola. I mentioned a couple of Beggs in the field. There's one there, number 21. And that is Lindsay O'Donnell. Built here in the South Island, of course. This is a round of the Formula 5000 Tasman Revival Series. They will continue on here from Ruapuna through to Teretonga for the Southern Festival of Speed, and they'll finish up in Auckland in early March. And every round they go to seems to build with enthusiasm and drivers. As I said, they expected to have something like 23 cars here, but the wet weather and a couple of incidents has put paid to a bit of that. But it hasn't spoiled this man's party. Number 30, Ian Clemens, out in the front, just gingerly getting on the throttle through that right-hander into the left combination now, and then up into the hairpin. Second place man, number 14, Murray Sinclair in the Lola T332. In the colours it was raced at, the number 14, that's the Graham Lawrence number, and I know that Graham and some of the ex-Formula 5000 drivers are here watching this as Ian Clemens takes the win. So second place it is Murray Sinclair, in third place David Abbott, and in fourth it is Tony Roberts.
Excitement is building at Teretonga Park as drivers prepare their cars for this weekend's Classic Speed Fest. Millions of dollars of machinery has been assembled from all over the world, ready for the historic race meeting. Joe Henderson went along for a look.
They are cars from a bygone era, champions in the 70s. With small chassis and V8 engines, Formula 5000 cars can travel speeds of 200 miles an hour. However, competition with the Formula 1 circuit meant the end of a racing era. Formula 5000 enthusiasts are now doing all they can to bring about a revival, in the form of a Trans-Tasman series, with 5 meetings at racetracks throughout New Zealand and Australia.
Absolutely. It'll never be a national formula. This is all about the cars. But they're fabulous cars. They sound absolutely awesome with V8 engines, obviously, 600 horsepower and nearly 200 miles an hour. So they're still a crowd pleaser. And a little more dangerous maybe than present motorsport, but they take us back to an era that was very, very special.
The series races are the highlight of this weekend's Classic Speedfest at Teretonga. Competitors have come from as far away as the UK. Husband and wife duo Frank and Judy Lyon race in the Formula 5000 and Formula 1 series in the UK. Judy is the only woman competing in the Trans-Tasman series and used to being in the minority.
Our son turned around and said, why doesn't Mum have a go? doesn't want to have a go? Don't be boring, you're getting older every day. If you don't do it now, you'll never do it. So I went and did my race driver's test, passed it easily, so I thought, why not?
Despite the fact these cars are over 30 years old, they're still the fastest on the racetrack. Auckland driver Tony Roberts is leading the series, but he doesn't rate his chances this weekend.
I don't expect to do all that well here because it's the first time I've ever been to Teretonga, so it's going to be quite a steep learning curve to learn the circuit and to get the hang of it all by the last race. But I'll try and be there, and then when they come to my home track, then it'll be a different story for the South Islanders.
Felix Motorsport coming next. We step back in time. Formula 5000 Racing at Pukekohe. This is racing at Pukekohe from the late 60s, racing before computers took over and the way the purists feel it should be. The Formula 5000 enjoying a revival. Yes, this class is what fans mean when they say racing isn't what it used to be. The Formula 5000 class raced earlier today. Very tricky conditions. In fact, there was some talk that they wouldn't race. It was touch and go, but in the end, the Formula 5000 race did take place. Calling the race, Phil Dark and Bob McMurray.
Well, something a little bit special here at Pukekohe Park Raceway for the placemakers V8 International. Now, if you're a motorsport fan in the early to late 70s, you'll know exactly what you're watching on your screens at the moment. But if you're new to it, these are Formula 5000 cars. In fact, there's a couple of sneaky ones in there as well, and we'll talk about them a little bit later. I'm joined in commentary by Bob McMurray, One Sports Formula 1 expert. Bob, I've got to tell you, there's not a lot of carbon fibre, there's not a lot of titanium, not a lot of obtanium in these cars, but some people say, and certainly the older fans I've talked to today, say these are real race cars.
Well, they sound like real race cars, don't they, Phil? They've got enormous 5,000cc engines, 5-litre engines. They're running 500 plus horsepower, and on a day like today, it is not easy to control them. Really not easy at all.
Well, yesterday's qualifying was a dry affair, and it was Roger Williams that sat the McRae on pole. But the bad news is Roger has gone into the pit lane, some problems with some tyres. Stu Lush will be alongside of him. In fact, he'll be on his own now in car number 22. Then it's Murray Sinclair in the very popular Lola T332, and Ken Smith alongside of him on the second row. Tony Roberts, how confident was he? He didn't even practice yesterday, but he's come out in the Talon in car number 1. Stan Redmond from Christchurch is there on the third row in the Lola, and David Abbott also in a Lola. A T430 sits alongside him. Ian Clemens, another of the Christchurch contingent that have made the trip up to Auckland, and Auckland's Shane Windleborn there as well. And really, Bob, this is a continuation, if you like, of the Tasman Series Revival Series that has been going on right throughout the country. And I went down to the Formula 5000 pitch yesterday, and the crowds and crowds of people, they are absolutely loving seeing these cars.
True, Phil. These cars are going through a bit of a revival through the whole world, actually, in England and in America. They're building cars up that have been abandoned for many years. But the thing is, New Zealand once more in motorsport is punching above its weight. It's got more 5,000 cars running per head of population than any other country, I think.
And you're seeing a great percentage of them here in the rain at Pukekohe Park Raceway. There is Stewart Lush in the Graham McRae engineered McRae GM1. 10 laps for these guys. As you said earlier on in commentary, Bob, it is going to be a test.
It is. It's going to be a bit of a gift for the Kenny Smith car, that sort of thing, if they really try to push it hard, because the tyres, unfortunately, they're running. Kenny has now gone into the pits here.
Well, that's a bit of drama. There's some real synergy here with Ken Smith because, as you know, he is the current New Zealand Grand Prix champion. He won in a Formula Ford 14 years ago, virtually to the day. He won in the Swift that Nelson Hartley is driving. You'll see that out on this racetrack. And his first Grand Prix was in one of these cars, a Formula 5000 car. Not this car, of course. This is a Formula Atlantic. Told me he hasn't driven this for over 10 years. And it looks like he is going to start in the pit lane, or is he not going to start at all? He doesn't like the rain. He wears eyeglasses and he hates the rain, he tells me. So while they work out what's going to happen with Ken Smith, the safety car has pulled to the front of the field as Stewart Lush leads them around. Car number 14, Murray Sinclair, will be in grid position 3. So grid position 1 will be vacant, and the reason for that is that Roger Williams... Well, we said we had difficult conditions here, and look at that. One of the New Zealand Motorsport Park cars, the rescue cars, has got it wrong at the hairpin. So I bet he'll be buying the beers tonight, Bob.
Yeah, that's with only 150 horsepower. You can imagine what 500 horsepower feels like. Because you've got to remember that a lot of these guys are running intermediate tyres, not wet tyres. They don't have full wets because they rarely race in full wet conditions. So they are going to be taking it easy. You can imagine 500 horsepower suddenly coming in. You have to feather the throttle nice and easy.
So the safety car lights are out. It will disappear into the pit entrance, and we will be underway. A rolling start for the Formula 5000s. And the noise probably won't do it justice unless you've got sound around on your TV set, but the noise to hear these cars on full song as they come down the front straight is unbelievable. Across the stripe they go, and we are underway with the Formula 5000s, and it's car number 14 that's gone into the front, and that's Murray Sinclair. And what I like about these cars, Bob, is they keep them to their historic heritage. The 14 there is in the colours that Graham Lawrence would have driven this car in the 70s.
Exactly, and that's the number that he drove as well. And don't forget, Phil, when you're looking at this, there's no traction control. So these guys are getting off the line, not like Formula 1 drivers with traction control, launch control, which has been banned now, I know, but they're just feathering the throttle, touching the 500 horsepower and letting it ease in, and the only traction control they got is their foot.
And I guess we're going to talk about the fact that there's a big lump of a cast iron V8 motor sitting in behind them, so if you get a little bit out and maybe steps out a little bit, you've got the pendulum effect of all that weight. It's probably the higher centre of gravity than what certainly you're used to in Formula 1.
Well, when you look at some of these cars, you can see the heritage in the fact that this was the beginning of the aerodynamics, the beginning of the centre of gravity awareness, the beginning of the safety point of view. So a lot of these cars, centre of gravity didn't mean anything, and as you say, with all that lump behind you and a huge, great Hewlett gearbox, they all run a fairly standard gearbox at the back, it is a lot of kinetic energy at the back of the car, and so it wants to wag the tail, it wants to hang out on all the corners, and you've got to try and control that.
You know, we always talk in these motor racing is when it's weird about the visibility. How was that shot when we were following the second and third battle? You couldn't see anything.
No, I would imagine that they're having a lot of trouble, and the spacing amongst them is perhaps because they're not fully aware of what's in front. They are valuable cars. They don't make any more of these cars, you know. They're finding chassis and things all over the world, but they're valuable cars, and they want to take care of them. So they will race them. Absolutely, you cannot stop these guys racing, but in these conditions, it's difficult.
Have a look at our One Sport replay. This is an incident from Jeff Harriman by the look of it. This is coming into the Repco turn. And there is a graphic example of what you were talking about, Bob. Once they go, they go.
Exactly. I mean, that car is a lighter car, but nonetheless, once the front wheel got on the inside, got slightly drawn back, the front was drawn back straight away, no traction control, and around it went.
So Murray Sinclair is the race leader as he works his way up and over the Ford Mountain in this Formula 5000. As we said, this is in the colours that Graham Lawrence would have competed in the Tasman Series back in the mid to late 70s. And it really is something special to see these cars. And as I said, I was walking around the pits yesterday in the dry conditions here, and there was just crowds and crowds of people. Sure, they were of the older generation, but, you know, it was great to see these cars. I know they've been here before at Pukekohe with the Tasman Series revival. We've had some overseas visitors as well. And as Bob alluded to, this class in New Zealand is a world leader. Number 30 there is Ian Clemens from Christchurch. just pulling past David Abbott. David Abbott along with Tony Roberts and a couple of the others, one of the movers and shakers that have got this situation to where it is. You know, it's probably been the best part of 30, maybe more years that we've seen this class of racing on television, on network television, certainly in New Zealand.
I'm sure it is, Phil, and I urge people to go out and see it live sometime when they're running during the summer. With that shot of the car there, you can see the wing mirrors. Look how high they're perched, way up the top there. Now, what can you see with those wing mirrors behind you? A huge rear wing and a huge fat rear tyre. You have very little hope of actually seeing what's behind you, and perhaps that's why racing in the older days was a little bit more exciting. They were unpredictable cars to drive. They were difficult cars to drive. So I admire these guys these days from actually driving the cars, because they are quite difficult. People like Brian Redman and Peter Gethin had trouble driving them 30 years ago. So you can imagine what these guys are feeling now.
Car number 22 there is Stu Lush and the McRae GM1. When we talk about McRae, of course, that's New Zealand's Graham McRae built these cars, and they were ahead of their time back in the 70s, weren't they, Bob?
They were. Graham McRae actually was, of course, around McLaren at the time, so there's an awful lot of bits of these cars, especially the GM1s and things like that, that perhaps owe a lot of heritage to McLaren, and they also owe a lot of bits to McLaren as well, because there was a great backdoor trade in McLaren in those days.
I think this is Ian Clemens just climbing out of his car, so his race is over. And you mentioned before, Bob, that the last thing you want to do is hurt these cars. They are really collector's items, priceless, and museum pieces. The hand comes up, and it is number 30 that his race is done, Ian Clemens.
Yeah, I suspect he's had a problem with engine or transmission there, because he's going off very gently. No smoke, no bullets coming out.
Now, we mentioned the engines. They're predominantly Chevrolet 302, cast iron block, aluminium heads. So we're past the halfway stage in the Formula 5000s here at the Placemakers V8 International, and it is Murray Sinclair in the front. You're watching the battle for 5th, 6th and 7th at the moment. David Abbott is in it. Ken Smith is in it as well. So too Stan Redman. And don't forget Nelson Hartley. And as we told you before, some synergy there with Ken Smith. Nelson Hartley in the car that Kenny Smith won his 2nd New Zealand Grand Prix in. There is the maestro, Ken Smith, well into his 60s, quadruple bypass, but what a guy this man is, Bob McMurray. He is a New Zealand Grand Prix holder. I guarantee if you had said to him 2 years ago that you'd have the Grand Prix every 14 years, he would have just laughed at you, but that's exactly what he's done.
That's absolutely true, and it's a bit of a shame, because every time I see Kenny Smith, he asks me if I've arranged a drive for him with Ron Dennis in Formula 1 now. Now he's a Grand Prix winner. So he doesn't lose his enthusiasm, that's for sure. But just to give you an indication, they're lapping at the moment about 1 minute 13 seconds per lap. Now, yesterday they were doing in the dry. They're quite capable of doing 54-second laps. So, you know, they are taking it easy, these guys, but 1 minute 13 down to 54 seconds shows you how fast they can go around this track. The big back straight, the long back straight is made for a 5000 car. It can stretch its legs. They're getting up to, well, probably ridiculous speeds, Bill, but I think they're probably getting up to the speed of a V8, certainly a V8 car at the back there, but most of the guys rein the speeds in a little bit at the back, because they don't have the brakes. They have big steel brakes, and they don't have the adhesion on the tyres sometimes. The tyres take, even in the dry, take a long time to heat up. Don't have tyre warmers or anything like that, so you can imagine all that rubber mass has to heat up and start acting like a Formula 1 tyre.
Car number 1 on your screen now. This is Tony Roberts. As we said to you, all the confidence in the world. Tony didn't practice yesterday. And really, I mean, the practice yesterday doesn't mean anything now, because we had perfect summer conditions at Pukekohe Park yesterday. We haven't got that today, but we've got a big crowd, and I'm sure they're enjoying this. Murray Sinclair continues to lead this race, though, from Stu Lush, the man in 3rd on your screen. And behind him, it is Stan Redman.
I think Tony Roberts' failure to appear yesterday morning, Phil, was more to do with the fact they wanted to get the car prepared properly than overconfidence.
Oh, I'm sure.
He was here yesterday afternoon, but they had a few issues with some suspension parts, and they wanted to make sure they're absolutely right for such a big meeting.
Car number 15 there in 4th place, Stan Redmond, the Flexi Plus sponsored car, one of the movers and shakers in the South Island with the revival of the Formula 5000. Trish and John Crawford, of course, they've set up a sideline to their racing school with a business of rebuilding these cars. And it's not a simple matter, is it, Bob, of going to the local speed shop and buying a front end or something like that. It's a matter of probably, if you want to do it as historically and as correctly as possible, you've got to trace them right throughout the world to get the parts. Either that or you make them.
That's right. You have to make a lot of the stuff yourself. And it's encouraging to notice in that organisation there's 2 or 3 ex-Formula 1 mechanics. One of the guys I was speaking to earlier on has just finished with the BAR team only last year. So they are being looked after by very competent mechanics who understand the situation. When I was talking with Andrew Neil earlier from BAR, he was saying that they're actually really very interesting to work on. There's certainly not as many electronics and things like that to fit on the cars these days, but simple mechanical engineering, you can really tune the car to do what you want it to do rather than plug it into the wall and tell it what to do by computer.
Well, so watching the closing stages of the action here in the Formula 5000s. No, you haven't stepped back in time. It's not the mid-70s with the flared jeans and the paisley shirts. We are in 2004. This is the Placemakers V8 International, but this is something special. Car number 14, Murray Sinclair, in the front in the Formula 5000 race here. We're on to the last lap of 10. I'll tell you what, Bob, for some of the people in the stands that were probably here in the 70s, this is an emotional time, a chance to have a look at these beautiful cars again. And the hallmark of this class is they are all immaculately prepared.
They are, Phil. They're very, very well prepared indeed. In fact, I think we've got about 2 laps to go. I was just looking at the car with Jimmy Murdoch's name on the side just now, and it was Jimmy Murdoch was a mechanic at McLaren at the time and built that car with George Begg. Jimmy Murdoch now lives in Kerry, and his kids are actually the contenders for the sailing Olympics. So it shows you how things go round, doesn't it? He's probably here watching them as well. In fact, it's slowing down. As I say, that is slowing down on the back straight.
You know, Bob, we know you as the expert of Formula 1, but you've got a history with these cars as well.
Oh yeah, a little bit, Phil. Yes, I was. I started working on them when I was 3 years of age. Put it that way. Yeah, as I say, a lot of these things, a lot of these bits of these cars came from McLaren, and a lot of the design is owed to McLaren as well. That was not a sensible getting out of the way. That was being too polite, I'm afraid. Not only does it. Not only has he got similar colours to a Minardi in Formula 1, I think he was driving about some of the Minardi drivers' pace there.
Went to the same driving school, perhaps.
Yeah, unfortunately, that was being over-polite.
Stan Redmond it was. He's got the big Chevy going again.
Yeah,
He's underway.
He was just trying to keep out of the way of a faster car there, and it's very greasy on the outside.
All these cars running Avon tyres. And Stan heading back into the pits as this race winds its way to its conclusion. They had a race of the Revival Series in Christchurch earlier on this year, and they had 25 cars. And if you cast your mind back to the days of the Lady Wigram trophy races at the airport, they never got 25 cars on the grid, so that says something. 14, though, is your race leader. This is Murray Sinclair. The last lap is out, so he is working his way towards the end of this one. We missed something with the exclusion of Roger Williams because he didn't have the wets, but take your hat off to Murray Sinclair in the 14. He comes through and wins it. In second place, it will be Tony Roberts, car number 1. He's coming over the top now. And in third place, it will be a man that I am a huge fan of, and that is Ken Smith.
Murray Sinclair taking out the race 1.3 seconds ahead of Stewart Lush, Tony Roberts third, and the New Zealand Grand Prix winner Kenny Smith holding fourth position. David Abbott fifth, finishing a minute behind Sinclair. So, good performance from Sinclair. The car's lovingly prepared. And Bob, we'll start with an apology then, shall we?
Yeah, I have to apologise to number 15, Stan Redmond. I was a bit flippant on him there, but he actually went into the corner, went wide, making room for the guy that was trying to overtake him, and got totally watered out. He was just sailing the car around there. So
this was the Minardi reference.
This was the Minardi reference. So I think I'll apologise to that straight away. And the other car was Ian Clemens, the yellow car. I didn't think anything had happened with the engine. Apparently put a rod through the side of the engine, so he was just able to coast to a halt. But I do apologise to Stan Redman.
And what did you do with them when you were 3 years of age?
Yeah, it wasn't that long ago, actually, was it? Well, apparently so, yes. So I'm told by my mother. A lot of those cars were built when we were at McLaren's and around McLaren's in my early days, so they were good to see again. And
seriously, I mean, it's lovely to see those cars. I mean, your eyes are almost misting over with nostalgia.
It is. Well, it's lovely to hear them, and they look like racing cars, don't they? Fat tyres at the back, thin tyres at the front, big wings. They look like a racing car.
Yeah, it's great. Great to see them, the Formula 5000 racing at Pukekohe. Very interesting and good day at Pukekohe, especially after yesterday with all the rain, and we're looking forward to the live supercars coming at 3:40. Right now we're looking at Formula 5000 racing. This is racing, I guess you could say, from an era before computers. Good old-fashioned racing. The Formula 5000, Murray Sinclair won yesterday. We pick up today's race from earlier today on lap 6.
22, Stu Lush in the McRae, as Bob told you, a New Zealand designed and built car. This battle for second and third continues. Oh, correct that. 14, of course, has gone into the front with the demise of... Oh, and this I've spoken too soon. I put the commentator's kiss of death on Murray Sinclair, and that allows Kenny Smith. Well, now, this has got a bit of synergy as well. We said yesterday in commentary that Kenny Smith is a 3-time New Zealand Grand Prix champion. Once in a Formula 5000 car, once in the car that Nelson Hartley is scheduled to drive in this race, and that is one of the Swifts. And here we are, the replay of Stu Lush, and you can see that they're not going slow, Bob, and that happened very, very quickly indeed.
It did, and once again, as we've said earlier, that large 5-litre engine behind that big gearbox, once that kinetic energy gets out of line, it'll just step round on you, no problem at all. Now, Kenny Smith is incidentally driving this car for the first time this weekend. He's only just acquired this car, I understand, and this is the first time he's driven an Atlantic car for 6 or 8 or 9 years, depending on which story you believe of Kenny Smith. But he certainly remembers how to get around here. And Stewart Lush is obviously coming back at the number 14 car. No, he can't do it under braking quite there.
Through the Holden hairpin they go. This is a battle for second and third now. Kenny Smith out of trouble and in the front. You get the feeling that this one may go right down to the wire. This race usually go over 10 laps. So plenty of racing time left as they work their way up over the Ford Mountain. Kenny Smith out in the front. He's already into the Repco turn, but this battle continues to be a beauty.
I think by the setup of the car, look, I was just about going to say that by the setup of the car, once he gets to the back straight, the power will see him through, I suspect.
So 14, Hayes 22 at the moment. The battle for second and third, Murray Sinclair and Stewart Lush out in front. It is the veteran, Kenny Smith.
Stewart Lush is getting in a bit of clean air here. He's going to try and make a run all the way down the inside, and here he goes.
So the lead changes as we get to the business end of this Formula 5000 race. Second place, I should say, changes as it's now the McRae GM1 through, and that is Stewart Lush. He set the car on grid position 2, but essentially it was on pole position because we lost Roger Williams, as we understand, the result of a broken drive shaft. So that was bad news because he was easily the fastest qualifier here yesterday, on Friday, I should say, in the dry conditions in 54 seconds. When you consider that the V8 supercars were going around here in 56 and change, and if we have a look at the comparison times, the 0 to 100 kilometre an hour time, a Formula 5000 car in 1978 we're talking about now, got to 0 to 100 Ks in 2.9 seconds. A V8 supercar in the year 2003 got there in 3.4 seconds, so appreciably quicker.
Look at the lovely shape of that car. That's a 1975 Lola T400. You can see just 1 or 2 years difference makes a lot of difference in the aerodynamics of the cars. That's Shane Windelburn driving that Lola T400, and it's they're beautiful cars. There's number 1. There's Tony Robertson, the Talon. Once again, this has got a history. It's got the name of Chris Amon on the side of it. This is the original colour, and it's built as originally as he could get as Chris was driving it.
So Tony Robertson, 4th place at the moment. Behind him, it's Lindsay O'Donnell from Christchurch in the South Island built car, the big FM5.
And I'm sure these guys won't, or Kenny won't mind us actually saying that although Kenny's in front, if we look at this as a Formula 5000 race, then perhaps this guy is 3rd, not 4th.
So we're into the last lap here at Pukekohe Park Raceway in, happy to say, drying conditions as we watch this Formula 5000 race. Kenny Smith has got a problem. That's on the back straight, and the car is slowing dramatically.
Obviously, I've got some sort of curse on the commentator's curse already, Phil.
The hand comes up, so unfortunately for Ken, his race is run. He'll get the Genuine Vehicle Imports car off the racetrack, and that is going to hand it on a plate to number 22, Stewart Lush. Tony Roberts coming into this battle as well, so first, second and third work their way through the Holden hairpin for the last time, and this is going to be a good one, Bob. Second and third hasn't been decided yet. I think first we might give it to Lush, but look at this, Sinclair and Roberts are going at it hammer and tongs.
Tony Roberts still has a shout just as they come over the hill here. He can get up the inside perhaps. It's a slightly more nimble car, but I think once again no substitute for CC, and it just powers away. 1, 2, 3. That's a very good race, Phil.
Checkered flag comes out. It is number 22, Stewart Lush, takes the win, and that battle for second went right down to the wire, but it was Sinclair through ahead of Tony Roberts, and then Kenny Smith. Well, you wouldn't want the sort of luck that he's had on the racetrack in this race, because on the very last lap, on the very last time up the back straight, it stopped. Good battle for the minor positions as well. Number 11 in that, Aaron Lewis. 3, David Abbott. And there's Ken talking to the officials, all the lap scorers here at Pukekohe Park Raceway. He's been doing this for so long, he probably knows them personally. Fantastic racing, a blast from the past. The Formula 5000s here at Pukekohe Park Raceway, a part of the Placemakers V8 International Weekend.
And that is a reversal of the result from yesterday. Stewart Lush winning from Murray Sinclair, Tony Roberts third again, Lewis and Windleburn rounding out the top 5. Race 2 of the Formula 5000 from earlier today. And it is a class of racing that is enjoying a revival worldwide. With me is Bob McMurray. And Bob, you were saying yesterday that it is enjoying a revival, especially in New Zealand. Why is it so popular here?
I don't know, Jeff. I think because of the Tasman series, a lot of cars came here, and a lot of cars tended to stay here. And because of the Kiwi way of keeping old cars together, I think a lot of them are in garages around the place, and they're used now. Whereas in England, they tended to disappear. They got very quickly into other cars and other formulas and things like that. But don't forget, this formula really went out of fashion in 1975 or 76, really. It hung on in Australia for a little bit longer, but it really is having a revival around the whole world. Really
I'm
is.
not sure
But you can see why.
Not sure you can forget what you can't remember, because that was so long ago for most of us, Bob, but I'm glad you can remember it. Interesting point you raise about the New Zealand motorsport tradition of cars being in garages but then being brought out for meetings like this.
Yes, well, there's, for instance, Kenny Smith. You know, we've talked a lot about him this weekend, but he has a tremendous collection of cars, and he's willing to use those cars. They're there to race. They're not there to look at. Incidentally, talking about Kenny Smith there, he ran out of fuel in the end of that last race for reasons that he miscalculated himself how much fuel it would take to get around here. So I'm smiling when I say that. But he's very good at lending cars out, and he has lots of cars, and he has a tremendous heritage in keeping old cars.
All right, yes, Kenny Smith, no doubt about his place as far as New Zealand motorsport.
Welcome back to Ruapuna Park Raceway for the Scope Classic, and this is what the big crowd has been waiting for. This is the Sir Robertson Stewart Grand Prix, and a chance to have a look at these mega horsepower flying machines, the Formula 5000s. Car number 1, Stan Redmond, is in there. So too number 3, David Abbott. Number 14 there is Murray Sinclair in the Lola T332. These cars sounding absolutely fantastic as they get to stretch their legs on the front straight here at Ruapuna, but they stop equally as well as they go. Probably not equally as well, but close to it. Clemens in the front. The Flexi-Class sponsored number 1 there of Stan Redmond. Now Redmond is the lap record holder here at Ruapuna. Car number 74 there, Roger Doe. And it's all a little bit much for him as he works his way into the dipper and spins it round. One of the good things about Ruapuna is there's a lot of runoff area. 30 continues to lead Ian Clemens. 3, David Abbott through in second place, a brother of Chris Abbott, who along with the New Zealand Racing Drivers Club brought the Yellow Pages 500 down here to Ruapuna Park. And that is really the only meeting that surpasses the Scope Classic in spectator appeal as another one of the big Formula Thousands goes wrong, and that is the race leader. That is Clemens, and also the 22 has gone as well, Stewart Lush. So that has thrown a spanner in the works. The McRae doesn't look like it's going to go any further. No, he's unbelted and coming out. And so too, I think, Ian Clements. Well, he's thrown away a great lead, and that has left number 14 to hit the front, and that's Murray Sinclair in the Lola 332. So down towards the checkered flag they come, and maybe some problems for the man in second place, Phil Major, but Murray Sinclair it is that gets the win. Second place it is the South Island car, Phil Major in the Beg, and in third place Dave Abbott in the Lola.